Cageside with John Morgan.
And we are back post 298 pay-per-view. This is Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. I wish I could have some really fancy intro for you, but I don't. We all watched it. We all saw everything that happened, and new champ. To break it all down, he was in the building because usually you see him in the distance. I mean, he was more prominent than a lot of the fighters this night with his positioning in the media press box. His name's John Morgan. Follow him on Twitter, JohnMorgan_MMA. What up, brother?
Not much, man. What's going on? Yeah, they had me placed pretty prominently in there for sure. I was definitely in the blue corner. But, man, you don't even need a big fancy introduction after a card like that. I mean, how long were we talking about the fact that we were excited by the whole card? We were excited by the main event. We were intrigued by it. And then this thing just delivered from start to finish. I don't know if there was a bad fight on the card. I know some people maybe were a little critical of Ian Garry. I wasn't even that critical of that fight, to be honest with you. I thought it was just a great card from start to finish.
Yeah, I think we'll get into Ian Garry, and the only reason to be critical of Ian Garry is because of the way he talked prior to. You take that out of the equation, his performance was spotless.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
That's the criticism I think that people can have of that. But man, he's down the card in what we got to talk about right now.
I was like, I don't even know if we'll get there. I hope we get there, but if not, that was that.
Ilia Topuria and new improves his record to 15-0 with a second round knockout of Alexander the Great Volkanovski. We have gone back and forth about where this lies. We didn't know who was better in certain areas. It was evident right off the bat. Topuria was the cleaner striker. Topuria was not even close the faster striker as well.
Yeah, no question about it. I thought that speed thing was going to really, be his advantage. I mean, you and I both said, right? I mean, this is a 50-50 fight, man. I mean, if you're writing Ilia Topuria off and saying he's untested, he hasn't really faced the top of the division yet. And I heard all those criticisms, and they were fair, right? It's not like he beat a ton of ranked contenders on the way up. He only got a handful. But, man, he delivered when it mattered most. And gosh, he was talking big. I mean, at the press conference, he's talking about, I'm going to shock the world. I'm going to change the game. It's trying, offering Alexander Volkanovski respect for what he had done and for who he is as a person. But as far as his game, just saying, man, I'm going to destroy this man, and went out there and delivered. And listen, it was a fight that, as you said, right from the start, I mean, Alexander Volkanovski did win the opening round on all three judges' card. He won it on my personal card as well. But it wasn't by much. And you could tell, like, okay, we got ourselves a fight. Maybe Volkanovski's a little bit more in this opening round. But Topuria settled in right away. And that was another question we all had, right? How's he going to perform in this stage, right? In this spotlight, in this moment, all that he's been building to. And it turns out that Topuria is the real deal, man. And gosh, maybe a budding superstar for the UFC.
The composure that he came out with, right off the bat, I was just like, I had a buddy over. We're sitting watching the fights, and I just remember thinking to myself, with about a minute or two left in that opening round, I'm thinking to myself, unless Volk changes the way he is fighting, it's a matter of time.
Yeah,
you see that?
It was because you could tell, even with him taking the opening 5 minutes, you could see Topuria, especially in the second round, even late in the first round, really start to find his rhythm, right? You could tell, like, okay, he's settling in now. He's got the range. He's got the feel. There's going to be some nerves, right? I mean, that's what the experience matters, to be in that stage, to have the UFC title on the line. That arena was hot, man. The Honda Center was rocking in Anaheim. I mean, it was electric in there. You're going to have a little bit of nerves, and you've never been in that moment before. Volkanovski had, and so he looked composed right away. He was moving well, but he wasn't really establishing any sort of dominance early. He just showed some nice movement, showed some decent evasion, mixing things up. Didn't really get a chance to turn to his grappling. You and I talked about that. He's kind of got that physical specimen kind of bull rush thing going, and he never really got a chance to turn to that. And he said after the fact, hey, I think I was about to get to that. I felt like I was starting to get in and I was ready to unleash the whole arsenal. And that's when I got clipped and that's when I got caught. And I believe him at his word. Volkanovski's an honest guy. I don't think he's a guy to make excuses or to go back and say anything that's untrue. But he just got clipped, and Topuria was settling in. As you said, I don't think he felt any threat at all. I think that was probably that opening stanza is like, hey, what's going to happen? What's the champ? What's the pound for pound great going to throw at me? And then I think Ilia realized, like, oh, wait a minute. I'm good. I'm comfortable with this guy. I'm fast with this guy. I'm moving with him. He had a nasty leg kick early on that really caught my attention. That I think Volkanovski is like, "Ooh, that one got me there."
360 pirouette off of it.
Yes, he did. And then really, man, you again in round two, the range was there, and you could see Ilia just so comfortable, and that speed, that crisp boxing that he has, man, it is. I mean, it's amazing. And what's amazing is that if this was the only fight you've ever seen of Ilia Topuria, you might say, well, that guy's got nice hands, but I don't know. Yeah, I think probably if you take him to the ground, he'll be a fish out of water there. Yeah. No, he's really good on the ground. You didn't get
the only thing I'm disappointed in this fight is I didn't get to see that matchup on the ground because we never got there. Here is where, like I said, about maybe a minute and a half left in the opening frame, where I was really worried because, like, listen, I think if you're not a Volk fan, then you're let's just be honest, you're an asshole.
Bro, how about that old man Volk stuff, showing up to the press conference wearing the old man suit from the commercial? Yeah. And you're right. He's just a great human being. If you don't like him, you're 100% right. There's something wrong with you.
Exactly. And so I'm disappointed in that aspect just because he's such a likable figure. But going in, like I said, back to what my point was, around a minute and a half left in that round, I was just like, man, I'm really worried for Volk here. And this is where it's not necessarily Volk. I'll get there where I think there were some like deficiencies in where he normally fights to the way he was fighting, because there was. But from Topuria, where I was so impressed, because we were talking about the speed and the power that he had, is that he had zero wasted movement in anything he did in that first round and, through half of the second. Every motion that he made was calculated, it was precise, and it was conserving. I don't know if he's ever gotten tired, but it would conserve as much energy as you can conserve in a fight. He was high and tight. He was walking in, closing the distance. Yeah, he was getting hit with jabs, right? But when he was on, everything he threw was laser focused and with power. And you can sustain that over a long period of time if you are doing everything with max efficiency and pure calculation. And he was. And that is what I was so impressed with.
Yeah, the guy's the real deal. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about what he did in the run to the title. And he came in and he, he beat Yusuf Zalal, he beat Damon Jackson. Those are tough, kind of gritty guys. He beats Ryan Hall, the specialist, beats Jai Herbert, a good guy, but not, a contender right now in his career. But this run at the end of Bryce Mitchell, Josh Emmett, and Alexander Volkanovski, that is incredible. And hold on, to submit Bryce Mitchell, to last a full 25 minutes with Josh Emmett, the guy that you're worried about, he can catch you at one punch at any point, and then to knock out Alexander Volkanovski. I mean, this guy is showing us range, and you're right. I don't see. We talked about the game plan going in. What would it be? And part of the reason was because we just don't see a whole lot of deficiencies in either one of these athletes' games. And now that I've seen Ilia Topuria knock out the pound for pound great Alexander Volkanovski, now you start looking for, how would I attack him? What are the holes? Where do you see it? Boy, there's not a whole lot of them that are readily available and readily apparent for you to go attack. This guy is phenomenal, man. It's clear he is a top-level athlete. And as you said, he's precise. He's intense. He does everything the right way. Man, deserving champion. Absolutely deserving champion.
Flawless victory. I want to get to Volk now because there's a lot of questions there. And it's very easy to Monday morning quarterback this. But from what I saw early on, yeah, he won the opening frame, though. Like, I was worried after about the first minute on. And one, when he was on his back foot first, right out the gates, that worried me because Volk doesn't fight that way. He doesn't fight moving backwards. Islam Makhachev wasn't pushing him backwards in the way that Ilia was pushing him backwards. He did not fight the longer, rangier Max Holloway that way. 3 times. He pushed the pace. He kept his center of the octagon with Max Holloway and Islam Makhachev. And of course he did that with Brian Ortega. He did that with the Korean Zombie, and we can go down the list. But when I look at, Max didn't push him back in their 3 fights. Islam didn't push him back. But in the first 30 seconds of the fight, Ilia is already pushing him back. That worried me.
That's a great observation. And I thought the same thing, as I was making my notes watching the opening round. I thought, I pointed that his movement looks good. Like he looks like he's in good shape. He looks like he's going to be able to outline. But I was a little bit curious. Why is this the game plan, or is this maybe a reaction to the last fight? The knockout that we talked about. And is there a little bit of trepidation? Is there a little bit of hesitation? Because I don't know. And again, he didn't go into detail as to what his game plan was, and I think that's because he's hoping that there's an immediate rematch down the line for him. But I was a little bit surprised by that as well, and I don't know if that was by design, by reaction, or if it was simply because of the way he was, some lingering doubts because of the previous outing.
Listen, when you get head kick KO'd, it might not change you as a fighter, your skill set and your propensity and your ability to take damage. It doesn't a lot of times. I'm not saying it did here because I don't want to put that on Ilia Topuria. Like, well, he fought a diminished Volk, because I don't really truly believe he did. But what I do think is if Volk had some diminished qualities there, it was here, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about that last week and the prior week. And the reason I say it is like Volk did things that I don't see him do. And he was doing it repeatedly. And guess what? I called this knockout in the second round. I said he needs to come over the top of that jab. And he did. Now that's not the shot that knocked him out. It was the left hook that knocked him out. But then he was timing that jab and he was coming over the top of it. And it was the way Volk was throwing it. He was moving and throwing it and flailing himself backwards every single time. On the broadcast, Bisping noticed it, and he said he didn't say it from the flailing nature. He's saying, well, when he backs up, he's leaving his chin in the air, which he was.
Yep.
But it was more of like every motion that I saw Volk doing was with, not saying you're scared, I'm ultra worried of the counter coming back. And so when he threw that jab, I don't know if you recall it, and he's moving sideways at the same time, he's also like flailing this other arm back. He was never composed in here, boom, and jumping in like he normally does. It really was very perplexing to me.
Yeah, again, another great observation from you, because that's what we think about with Volkanovski, right? Is not only that forward movement, but his ability to just make those minor adjustments in the pocket, right? He's right there in your face. As you said, he is composed. He's doing everything structurally sound. He's doing everything technically sound in the pocket. And you're right, he was moving. And, I did ask him afterwards at the press conference, like, hey, listen, you know the conversation, I'm sure. Is he turning around too fast? Is it? And he said, no, physically, I believe there was any elements. He's like, I believe that shot would have knocked me out regardless. You get caught by something like that, it doesn't matter that it was a 4-month turnaround or anything like that. He's like, I just got caught. But I like what you're saying is that I'm not necessarily saying it was the physical deficiencies, but maybe just the strategy. And that's what we talk about, right? The 1%, the little tiny little, millimeters here and there that change after losses, especially after a knockout loss, because there's a lingering bit of hesitation. It's natural. It's human nature. It's almost impossible to get rid of. And that may have really played a big factor here.
I don't even recall him throwing a right hand after the jab. I don't. He may have. I just don't recall it because it was never a game changer in the fight. Because like what Volk usually does, like, yeah, he'll stick that jab out there, but he blitzes you with that right and then a combo and then can change levels. And that blitzing nature of what he does, he didn't do any of it. He was a one strike, throwing some leg kicks here and there, really. But it was more of like, in my opinion, even the jabs were more of a like, let me breathe. Like, quit coming after me. Let me breathe.
Well, it's funny, right? And you do such a great job of breaking down fights. But when we break down MMA fights, there's so many different aspects and positions and strategies that you have to take into effect. Had you and I looked at this fight ahead of time and say, hey, John, Eric, here's what I need you guys to break down. This is going to be a kickboxing fight. And oh, by the way, Volkanovski is going to be, fighting off the back foot and looking to counter. Wouldn't take us very long to break that down at all. I'd be like, well, it's not going to be a good night for him. You know what I mean? Go ahead and get Topuria the belt now. And that's what it ended up being. And again, I don't think that was, there's no way that Volk, who is a master strategist himself and just knows the game inside and out, there's no way that he wanted the fight to go that way. There's no way his team drafted a game plan like that either. So I think that goes back to your point that, maybe there was just a touch of hesitation there, a touch of impact from that last fight that led him to not being willing, as he has in the past, to really be on the front foot and really set the pace and set the pressure early and end up costing him here.
The only thing I can go off of is what I saw, right? And what I saw was the same Ilia Topuria, and what I saw was a different Volk. Now that begs the question here. Was it because of Ilia Topuria, or was it because of, as we say, the trepidation or whatever? I don't know the answer to that question, but I've never seen Volk on his back foot for a sustained amount of time, and yet also in the first 10 seconds of a fight, like he was on Saturday night. I've just never seen either of those things.
No, it's a spot on observation, and it really is. I think what that really, leads you to think is what comes next, right? Because Volkanovski immediately said, listen, man, this guy's the real deal. Hats off to him. Again, all class. He always is. Hats off to this man. He's like, but, and he said it in the cage, and he said it at the press conference afterwards. He said, listen, I know, Ilia wants to go to Spain. He wants to bring the UFC to Spain to make the Spanish debut. I hear Dana White saying that, hey, we want to go to Spain. How about I go to Spain and we do this rematch? Let's do it again in his backyard. He beat me. Now it's my time to go to his backyard and we do it there. And that's great. You know what I mean? A rematch. I mean, if anybody deserves a rematch, it's Alexander Volkanovski, the man that's been the company man, that's stepped up in every opportunity that's needed, that's offered rematches when necessary, when maybe he didn't, it wasn't necessary for him to do. You talk about Max Holloway being willing 3 times, man, and never really complained about it, said if that's what we're doing, we'll do it. So, I mean, the guy's a company man and he's a dominant champion. He deserves the rematch. But I got to be honest with you, man. I don't know if that's the right move for him right now to just let's jump back in there and let's do this again. I mean, we were already a little bit concerned that, hey, maybe that 4-month turnaround after a knockout loss was a little too fast. Now you're talking about 2 in a row. You'd really recommend some time off. To Volk's credit, he did say, well, listen, Ilia is a new champion. We don't have Spain on the books yet. So, I mean, I'm imagining this is going to be 5-6 months from now before we do this. But even then, is that enough time? And are there adjustments to be made? Or is this just the way these two match up? As you said, you don't know. Was this Topuria that caused this effect? Was it something with Volk that caused this effect? Can this be a different fight right away? I don't know, man. It's I kind of like the idea of him kind of just parking it for a little bit and hanging out and seeing what happens. Because even if somebody else steps in the meantime, even if somebody else gets the first crack at Ilia as champion, I think Volk could get a rematch after that. Like, I don't think Volk has to go win another fight. So I think he could sit in the background. Maybe it wouldn't be that Spain event, and that would be a lot of fun for him. But, man, I kind of like the idea of him hanging out for a little bit.
Dana White said Spain was 12 to 18 months out. Right? Okay. I've already booked this.
All right.
Okay. But I got to say, this is one of the reasons I didn't have this on my bingo card. But this is now, thinking about it more clearly, is one of the reasons why I hate the Max Holloway-Justin Gaethje matchup. Right?
You don't hate the matchup. There's no way you hate the matchup. I don't like it
to begin with. And it's just because of my affinity for both fighters. Like, I don't like that matchup. Just power.
Because somebody's got to lose, right? Just because somebody's got to lose.
Yeah, and the power of Gaethje scares me to a smaller framed Max Holloway. I think skill set he can match up, right? But we saw the damage that Dustin Poirier did to Max Holloway, albeit crazy that he never got knocked out when he took that many shots. But anyways, listen, Brian Ortega needs a win. Get him any win. And that's it. And then now you got a title shot somewhere down the line. And then now that sets up a Spain 12 to 18 months from now, Topuria, Volk rematch. Brian Ortega does have, and Max Holloway. I'd really like to see Max Holloway because Max is really good at using that distance and that boxing very, very, very well. I would love to see that matchup. Furthermore, I didn't say it on this show because I didn't want to seem like a hater and saying like I'd like to see Topuria have another fight before Volk, because obviously that was dumb of me to say publicly. But I do think that Max Holloway is a very interesting matchup for him. In the way Max Holloway is an interesting matchup for him, I think that Brian Ortega is an interesting matchup because those are two extremely, extremely long fighters.
I think you're onto something. I think you're onto something. I mean, look, Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje, we know that's happening at UFC 300, so they're tied up. So we know that's not going to happen. And anybody that hears that you don't like that matchup is going to think you're crazy because everybody loves it. But I understand your logic as to why, right? It's going to be a crazy fight. We know that. I do think, and I think you're kind of mapping it out. I mean, this week in Mexico City, you've got Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega in the co-main event. I think you got to look at that as the number one contender fight, and probably that winner gets Ilia Topuria first. Volk kind of hangs out on the sidelines, doesn't have to win anything, doesn't have to do anything, just rest up, heal up, and when he comes back, he gets the winner of that fight. Whether or not they can get Spain done faster, they were already talking about Spain anyway. This probably escalates that timeline a little bit, I'm guessing. Anytime you can bring a reigning champion to a new market, I mean, can you imagine not only the ticket sales that you're going to get, but also just the general media that you're going to get, the attention. I don't know if you saw Real Madrid, the powerful soccer club, one of the biggest clubs in the world of any sport, was doing collaboration posts on Instagram, congratulating Ilia Topuria. I mean, that is moving the needle. That is mainstream. Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega both speak Spanish as well. Obviously, Yair Rodriguez is a Mexican national, but Brian Ortega has the heritage. They both speak Spanish as well. So what a great fight. The winner of that, taking it to Spain for the first title defense, if they can make it happen in time. I think that'd be amazing because, it's always in the same way that we say it's, fighters catch on a little bit better in the market when they speak English in the United States, just because you're not having to hear through a translator. You're not having to slow down the exchanges and the back and forth. The same thing would be said for in Spain if both, athletes in the main event speak Spanish. So I really think, as you said, we got to see what happens this weekend. We're not even talking about that card yet, but it is happening in Mexico City. Yair Ortega, to me, that's the number one contender fight. They fight Topuria next. Volkanovski hangs out on the sidelines. He faces the winner late this year or early next year.
See, if I were to fantasy book this, I would say, prior to Spain, we get that, let's say, Ortega Topuria matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Then now let's say Topuria wins that fight. Now that sets up, call it a year from now, Volk, Topuria, Spain for the title. Like that's something would be awesome.
I like what you're doing there. But I think you're doing a little professional wrestling booking, right? Because you're like, well, we do Topuria Ortega first, and of course we got Topuria getting by Ortega, and then that's when
I don't. But I'm just trying to look at it logistically too. Like I don't think they're gonna get Spain up and running in 6 months.
Well, you may be right with that, but it's amazing what happens. Again, you're not just talking about a main event bringing the UFC. Now you're talking about a main event with a champion. All of a sudden, you've got some government entities that are stepping involved. They're saying, maybe we can make this happen. You've got some venues that are going, well, I think we had a concert that Saturday, but it was only going to be about half sold out. If we can bring, hey, how about we move you on down the road? So you are right. I mean, obviously, working in the NBA, you understand arena logistics and how difficult they are. It's not like they just hang out and wait. They got to book, a year in advance, and so I get it. It might be tough to turn around quick, but I will say when you have a reigning champion, all of a sudden things start to change a little bit. Again, the world sports superstars that were congratulating this man, all of a sudden you have some very motivated parties to make this happen. And I'll go back to what I was kind of joking about with the pro wrestling booking, is that, man, I just, when you risk it, you know what I mean? It seems like the MMA gods step in when you're like, well, we won't do it for his first one because it's a little too difficult logistically. We'll do it for his second one. And then all of a sudden, he slips on a banana peel. And look, first Ortega's got to get by Yair if we're talking about him. And look, Yair Ortega would both be great matches. They both be a lot of fun. But Ortega, man, that dude can submit anybody. And all of a sudden there's chaos. So I would just say, man, if you can do it, go there as soon as possible. I know it's tough, but go there as soon as possible because, you don't want to risk it. Ilia looks like he's primed for a reign. I'm not saying that like, hey, this is a delicate champion and you better take advantage before somebody just rips this belt right off of him. Like, no. He's primed for a reign. But they want that defense in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, I made the loose association of last week of just like the aura that Topuria has. He has it. I texted you and I was like, Kingpin.
definitely gave me a chuckle on press row as soon as he went. You hit it, man. He's got that Kingpin aura. Man, he had it. I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to see the press conference. I mean, the swagger that he had in there, and everybody, Volk shows up in the old man Volk costume from the commercial, and I mean already people love Volk anyway, and then he does that, and he does the thing where he's fakes that he's falling asleep at the press conference, and Paulo Costa comes and wakes. I mean, it's just he played it perfectly, and everybody's loving it. Anytime Ilia would start speaking, the crowd would just boo him mercilessly. I mean, he was clearly in enemy territory, and it didn't, matter to him at all, man. He was so confident. He's got that swagger. And what did we talk about last week, man? We've seen it over and over. There's a difference between a guy that really has that ultimate self-belief versus a guy that's just trying to play a character and look like he's confident. That dude has insane self-belief, insane confidence. He's got that Kingpin swagger. And, man, like I said, I think potential budding superstar, right? He's got the look. He speaks multiple languages. He's resonating with world sport. I mean, you still got to go out there and win.
He's drinking wine during his weight cut.
I mean, come on. How great is that, right? I mean, this dude has got it. He's got that swagger. So, I'm excited to see what he does. I'm excited to see what he does next. He's got a ton of potential for a long reign.
Yeah, well, just ultimately great performance. Pinpoint. Flawless Saturday night. Now here, I'm going to ask you, our co-main event that we said was Henry and Merab, which I was tremendously wrong on. But the real co-main was Whittaker Costa. Where do you want to go next?
I got to go Merab Cejudo. By the way, we were shocked that it was the third fight on the card. By the time it rolled around, it was the fourth fight on the card. Like, what is going on with that? I think you got to go with Merab and Cejudo next, and that's no offense to Robert Whittaker, man. He is a former champ, a future Hall of Famer, may challenge for the title again. But this was the coming out party for Merab Dvalishvili, and it was the second great moment of the night for the Georgian fans. I mean, what a night it was for them. Topuria, obviously, we talked about his Spain heritage, but obviously hails from Georgia as well. Merab as well. You saw the scenes from back home in their home country of people out at 6 o'clock in the morning in the cold watching these fights. But this was the breakout moment for Merab Dvalishvili against a Henry Cejudo that, I'll be honest with you, in that opening 5 minutes, I didn't think you were wrong. I was like, oh my gosh, like Eric had this one pinned, but ultimately Dvalishvili was able to turn the tide.
The nickname The Machine has never been more accurate about a fighter than it is about Merab. This guy gets clipped early, doesn't even fade, it phased him. It did not deter him from just beeline forward, right?
Yep.
The ease in which he was taking down Henry Cejudo was preposterous.
It's insane. The skills that he brings to the table, the workload that he brings to the table. Like we said, I mean, the technique of Henry Cejudo is phenomenal, but man, the fact that Merab can just chain it together nonstop, there's no concern, right? I mean, you're a grappler, you understand you have to weigh in. Okay, I can reshoot, but if I keep reshooting and reshooting and reshooting, I'm going to get tired, and I know that, and so I have to, all right, well, we'll hang out in this position for a second, and we'll see if I can make an adjustment. Merab, as we talked about, and I said it, and I just believe it. I think the world sees it now too. Like, this guy doesn't have to concern himself with fatigue at all, and because of that, he can take chance after chance, scramble after scramble, position to position, and doesn't have to weigh in the possibility that he might get tired. He is the Machine. It is, as you said, one of the most accurate nicknames in the history of this game. Like, the dude is not human when it comes to cardio. It's unbelievable. And I didn't think Cejudo looked bad. Like I said, man, he came in great physical condition. He looked good. He was intense, had a pretty good opening round. Meanwhile, Merab came out throwing spinning kicks, and I'm like, what is he doing? I'm like, if he loses his fight because he's out here throwing spinning kicks, like, what is going on? But finally turned to his bread and butter, and man, this man is relentless. He's over here trying to choke out Henry Cejudo while he's having conversations with Mark Zuckerberg. I mean,
what was with Zuckerberg? Like, Zuckerberg was everywhere in this. Like, I'm like, oh, Zuck, go away, man. I know you're a huge fan of MMA. Go away. Go away. I don't like it.
He is a big MMA fan. It was Merab talking to him was hilarious. Those memes that are going around, and I didn't see it live because I wasn't watching on TV. Obviously, I was Cageside. I didn't get to see it until after the fact of when he was in Volkanovski's corner, and he's like trying to grab stuff, and they just keep passing stuff by him. And he's like, what am I?
I actually took note of it live because he kept on putting his hand out to like grab the T-shirt, and the coach took it and then passed it over his hand to the other.
It's so great, man. It's so funny. Like, dude, you could be rich as hell, but you still might not be cool. You know what I mean? It was
yeah, exactly.
He looked so out of place, but it was so funny. You know, Merab, the kind of control that he was in, you know, nearly had the choke in the second round and was talking to Zuckerberg. But in the third round, when he lifted Cejudo up, and typically, you know, if you see a fighter lift another one in the air, before they slam him down, they generally will walk over to their corner if they have the wherewithal positioning, because they want to get as close as they can to their coach to be able to get any instructions and advice in this positioning. What does he do? He doesn't walk him over to his corner. He walks him over to Zuck and slams Cejudo down in front of Zuck to be like, here is your prey. This is what you came for. I mean, unbelievable. A dominant performance from Merab, who looked phenomenal and now sets himself up for a title shot in his next outing. Joe Rogan said it in the cage. I went ahead and confirmed it with Dana White afterwards. I'm like, look, you know, it seems like there's no way it could be anything else but title shot next for Merab. And he said, yep, title shot next for Merab.
That is a beast for anybody to handle. How does he have 2 losses in the UFC early on?
It's amazing, right? It just doesn't seem possible. And if you go back and watch him, man, there were some really weird, bizarre circumstances. So we had this 0-2 start, and I think a lot of people kind of wrote him off. A controversial split decision to Frankie Saenz, and then there was this Ricky Simone fight where he was ruled as being out, unconscious, and it was hard to see. It was one of those, man, it's a good one to study as a referee. If you'll remember that one, it's like face was down. It was really hard.
I don't remember it.
It's a good one to go look at because it was a guillotine choke, but you really couldn't see his face. The referee said he was out. He popped up immediately. It was hard to say whether he was or not. But, yeah, I mean, the guy started off in the UFC at 0-2, which is bizarre to think about. And now he's 10-2. He's rattled off 10 straight wins. And, man, looks like the real deal. And, listen, we got a great title fight coming up in this division at 299, which, I mean, come on, man. Sean O'Malley and Marlon Chito Vera, a phenomenal fight. But to know that they've got Merab on the other side of that, I mean, he is a problem for anybody in the division. So,
you know, O'Malley's sitting back there, cool, calm, and composed with his glasses and his coat. But he's like, yeah, oh, man. And this begs the question, right? And I turned to my buddy Mike, who was over, and I said, I have to ask this question now. With their, obviously, him and Aljo are brothers. They said it publicly. They were never, ever, ever going to fight each other. Now with, you know, Aljo moving up a division, it makes me think this was in the plans all along. And why? I want to see that training room footage.
Interesting. All right. No, I mean, listen, they've always expressed the fact that Merab has always said, he's like, look, this is my brother. This is who I grind with every day. And I won't fight him. And I respect it. But I think you're hinting at one of them, whoever it may be, knows that they always get the better of the other. And there's no need for them to ever actually do it in a fight because they know how it would go.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, you have to ask the question. They're clearly the 2 best bantamweights in the world outside of O'Malley, right? And you know what? And now that Aljo loses his title, he's always made that weight. But now he's going up. He's not even going back down into the division, trying to get his title back.
You know,
and he's opening the path for Merab, but that's all I got to say.
It's funny. I like what you're throwing out there. I tend to take these guys at their word, and I've always seen some beauty in the fact that, these guys, and Merab especially, right? It's easy for the champ to be like, hey, man, I would never fight my brother. It's a lot harder for the challenger who has not won the title, who has not cashed in those pay-per-view points, to say, I also will not fight my brother. And Merab always has.
What I'm saying, though, and I want to be clear about this, is I want to see the training room footage. I'm not saying it's because their friendship is unbreakable. I know it's unbreakable.
Right.
They said it's unbreakable. It shows that it's unbreakable. I'm not saying that it's from one way or another. I'm just saying I want to see the training room footage because one doesn't try and get his title back. He decides to move up a division. Like, listen, do I think if Aljo and O'Malley fight 10 times, do I think O'Malley's beating him 8 of those 10 times? I don't. I don't think O'Malley's beating Aljo 8 of 10 times.
I agree. Yep.
So why isn't he going back down and wanting that immediate title shot?
I think it was twofold. I do think the weight cuts had gotten really bad for Aljo, right? Like, I mean, when he was towards the end of his bantamweight run, like he would literally almost break into tears when he made weight. You know what I mean? He would be on the scale. They would call out 135 and the emotions that would come forth because, I mean, it was just a horrific weight cut for him. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part is it's my turn to let my brother go have his moment in the sun as well. But here's where it gets interesting. If for whatever reason this 145 journey doesn't go so well for Aljamain Sterling, and for whatever reason, if Merab Dvalishvili continues down this path of bantamweight destruction and he is able to get the title from either Cheeto Vera or Sugar Sean O'Malley, and then they start talking about it, then it starts to get real interesting, right? Does Aljamain go, well, maybe this 45 is not for me, and I know he's my brother, but I mean, we fight each other in the training room all the time. Why not do it for some money? You know what I mean? Which is always the flip side of that equation. So it could get interesting down the line. Again, I'm choosing to believe at face value. I think that, I don't think there was any nefarious goings on here. I just think the weight cut had gotten bad. But to be with you, I would like to see the training room. I mean, I'd grab a popcorn and a soda and sit down inside the gym and watch that because I bet those sparring sessions are as damn good as a fight we see on Saturday night.
I'll tell you what, you want to talk about stars, Merab is going to be a star. And even a guy who doesn't, quote unquote, finish fights because he's like unanimous decision king. He is so damn likable and has so much personality to him that he's going to be a star. I mean, you saw it. I think as much of the cheering for him and the booing for Cejudo was Cejudo's antics and the king of cringe. I think it was as much or equally, Merab just being that likable, like little figure. He's funny as shit.
Dude. He has got a personality. He's starting to really let it shine. You know what I mean? Like social media, whoever he's working with, they're putting out some funny stuff, some great video content. But even with that, it's not just like scripted stuff. It's just they're helping him get the stuff out there. I mean, he's just a funny dude. You hang around him, the nicest guy you'll ever meet, hardworking dude, and people are starting to see it. It was fun. I'll tell you what, afterwards, what was really funny was because you're right. He is becoming popular. He had the crowd playing out of his hand. I mean, they're just like, yeah, this is our guy. We love you. And they're praising him. And then he's like, and when my brother Ilia wins this later tonight, and immediately they all started booing him right away because obviously the title fight had yet to play out and people were so much loving both. So it was funny. They turned on him really quick when he mentioned, his fellow Georgian Ilia Topuria, but they came back around. It's clear fans are on that side. Now, again, I mean, I cannot wait. March 10th, UFC 299 in Miami. Marlon Cheeto Vera challenging against the champ, Sugar Sean O'Malley. That's going to be a great title fight. But Merab Dvalishvili has the capability of competing with and beating either one of those guys. I'm not saying it's an automatic. I mean, those are great, great fighters. They both edge him in the striking department. But, man, just the cardio machine, the grappling skills that he has, he's a tough matchup for anybody in the division.
A machine. All right, let's go over. Let's move to the co-main. Whittaker, Costa. Very close, competitive fight. One that had you on the edge of your seat the entire time. I mean, there was as much tension in that fight collectively over the course of 15 minutes as any fight on that card. And for Costa, his stock went through the roof in a loss.
Yeah, it was funny because after that fight was over, I was thinking about, you and I last week saying, man, not necessarily do or die, but like this dude has got to go in there and perform or like his stock could drop dramatically. And I just don't, it'd be real easy to say, well, he lost, so you guys must think it went down. Nope. I thought this was a great performance, man. He showed up. He was great at the press conference. He made weight. No drama, no issues, put on a great fight, very entertaining fight. And so it may, push him back a little bit in terms of championship status. But to hey, man, can we put him in a fight night main event next time? Can we put him in a big fight? Absolutely, man. Paulo Costa's stock went up. And it was that opening round really showed you why this was such an intriguing fight, because I thought Robert Whittaker was fighting perfectly. I mean, the timing was there, the movement, the slipping, the counters. I mean, Whittaker was in vintage form. I'm like, man, this dude is on from the start. And then he gets clipped with that spinning wheel kick at the end of round one. And I thought, oh, this might be over. He's doing the chicken dance out there and trying to recover. And had there been a little bit longer time in that round, Paulo Costa may have been able to finish. I think it was kind of a save by the bell type situation. And I thought, oh, my goodness, is he going to go out and, is he going to be okay in round two? And Whittaker was. He was able to clear the cobwebs in between rounds and went out and fought a perfect fight for the remaining 10 minutes. But that danger was always there. It doesn't take you don't have to know much about MMA to look at Paulo Costa and tell you he probably hits hard. You know what I mean? He's a gargantuan human being. You know what I mean? Yeah, you don't have to. And he does, and the power was there. And I thought it was a clear decision win. Afterwards, Costa looked a little bit disappointed. I thought it was pretty clear Whittaker won. I thought the opening round was an interesting one to score. I
still gave Whittaker round one.
See, I get it, man. The 30-27 for Mike Bell, I totally understand. I went with the 29-28 with Ron McCarthy and Elliot Kelly. I just felt like because that almost finished the fight, even though it was just a little tiny snippet of the round. So that's an interesting discussion. I think either score is justifiable, but I thought it was a great fight. And I think you're right, 100%. I think both guys' stock go up after a fight like that.
Here is what just defies logic. You have this human wrecking machine in Robert Whittaker literally teeing off on your face, exploding in all night for 15 minutes. And it didn't even look like Costa was in a fight. Conversely, Costa hits Whittaker with 3 or 4 big shots per round. And Whittaker, his face is hamburger.
I'm telling you, he looked rough after that fight. And Whittaker does mark up pretty easy. And he said afterwards, I always look like this. I'm like, yeah, I guess that is true. But
not like that.
Man. Not like that, though, man. Oh, man, it was blown up. He looked rough. I actually kind of wondered. I'm like, is he even going to come back for the post fight? Or maybe they send him out right away. Sometimes they'll do that if there's medical concerns. Obviously, fighter safety, number one. They won't even come back and speak to us. They'll just get him to the hospital. He did come back and speak to us. So he was doing okay, but he definitely rough. And you're right. I saw Paulo Costa kind of took to social media afterwards and like, look, where's the damage? I barely got touched. Why is this, his rounds? You just can't knock the handsome off that dude, man. He's just a good looking dude. He just, you know what I mean? No matter how hard you hit him.
Sitting down and watch the fight. I was like, what? Wife, go do something else. I don't even want to keep looking at this guy.
Yeah, right? I mean, come on, dude. Paulo Costa is the man. I thought that was a much needed performance. And that may sound weird to people, be like, a loss, though. Why is that a much needed? Yeah. He needed that. There just been all the weird things and the weird circumstances, and he went out there and he came up short against a former champ, a future Hall of Famer, but he entertained and he delivered on what he needed to do. And I'm back on the Paulo Costa bandwagon, right? If you were maybe you were thinking about hopping off and being like, this guy's not going to amount to anything. No, I think there's still bright days ahead for him.
He didn't even get rocked with all those big shots that Whittaker hit him with, and that's just like. This guy literally is built out of granite. He didn't even get rocked when Yoel Romero hit him with freaking hammers. Yep. It's amazing the damage this guy. When Luke Rockhold was like 1, 2, 3, and Whittaker, and Costa wouldn't even get out of the way. He'd eat it, take 2 steps back, and go.
So amazing. I love it. He did that a couple times, right? He was doing the come on. He was sticking the tongue out, right? He was putting on a show. He did a great job, man. He did a great job.
And I swear Whittaker hit him with the same exact combo probably 400 times. The same exact one. Jumping in jab straight to that left hook. And it literally hit clean every single time he threw it.
He was on point, and Whittaker, the timing, I marveled at it from the beginning. Because again, anybody that's standing in front of Paulo Costa, like you understand the inherent danger of what you're doing, right? Like
Just
that dude. Just look at him again. You never even have to watch a piece of tape on him ever, right? Like you never have to watch a video. You just have to look at him and be like, probably don't want to stand in front of this guy. And Whittaker was doing a great job of slipping and landing those combinations. I just thought the timing, the precision was perfect. He executed perfect, except for that one brief second. It almost cost him, but he battled through it and got the big win. And now he wants to fight, maybe as much as 2 more times this year. And Dana confirmed, like, hey, man, that guy's right back in the title picture. He has the losses to Izzy, but, there's so much happening at middle right now that it makes it interesting. And Whittaker's right there in the conversation.
We said this last week, Whittaker, Strickland.
Seems to be the fight to make, right? I think that's the fight to make. We'll see how it pans out scheduling wise and what happens. But that to me seems to be like the clear fight to make.
I don't want to dive into this, but what a dog Mackenzie Dern is. Dog.
It's funny. I got busted. You talk about my proximity to the cage and where I was positioned. I was just smiling as she went out for round 3 because I was like, oh my God, like. And people were laughing, but I was smiling because I'm like, this chick is as tough as it gets. Mackenzie.
But you were smiling at her heart. That's not what all the internet was saying.
Oh, no, that's what I was smiling at. Is that what they? Oh, no, I was smiling because she was going out. I'm like, look at this girl. Like, she is a fighter, man. Like, unbelievable. She gets hated on sometimes, and I get it, man. Her striking, it's not the greatest in looking at it. I mean, she packs some power in her shots, but she's not necessarily like, the smoothest striker on the feet. And I wish we talked about before, I wish she had like a powerful double leg that, she could just shoot in and take people down, and all that. So all those criticisms are fair of how she could evolve her game and how she could get better. But man, you cannot doubt that she is a fighter to her core, man, because she was in some spots that it would have been real easy to just be like, the professional give up, man, just cover up. Let a few more shots come in and the referee will come save me. And no, she's moving. She's turning. She's getting out of position. She's smiling as she walks back to her corner. She's smiling as she walks out there. Mackenzie Dern is a warrior.
With two busted up eyes, just like
telling
looking
you.
like, oh.
I thought it was a clear Amanda Lemos victory, of course. I thought the damage she did, it was a pretty clear, easy fight for me to score. There were a lot of people that I saw were surprised to score. I didn't see that. I saw some people thought that Dern won. I didn't. I thought Lemos won. But you just can't question the heart, man. She's a scrapper.
Yeah,
yes, that's what I was smiling at, internet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're smiling at the heart. I get it.
I was.
Yeah, I think real true, like, embedded fight fans know the criteria, and the criteria was, Dern, although had her good moments and there was potential threats there was no fight-ending sequences to it. And it was because of reputation of Mackenzie Dern being such a specialist that you thought like, oh, there's so much danger here. Where Lemos, she weathered those storms, stayed nice and composed. She didn't get herself in any danger there, but her hands were pinpoint. Let's move though on to Ian Machado, Garry, and Geoff Neal. I'm going to tell you this: Geoff Neal having 6 losses on his record. I don't know his record off the top of my head. I think he's got like 6 losses on there.
You are right. 15-6 after this.
For a 15-6, you look at a 15-6. That's one son of a gun that he is a proving ground. That's essentially what his nickname needs to be. Geoff, the proving ground Neal. Because if you can get through him, you're getting to that championship level spot. And he did not make it easy for Ian Garry. I could make arguments. I'm not saying it's true. I could make arguments that Geoff Neal won that fight.
Well, I'll tell you what, the 30-27 scores shocked me. I thought it was pretty clear that Geoff Neal won the opening round. So I thought, but I did have it 29-28, Ian Garry. I thought Ian won round 2 and 3. But I agree with you. And I think Geoff Neal, when he goes back and watches this tape, is probably going to be a little bit frustrated that he let off the gas a little bit. Now, Ian talked to Ian afterwards, and he's like, well, yeah, but that was because my movement that was because my jab, that was because my range. It wasn't like he just quit. It's because he got frustrated because he's having some issues, and that may be the case as well. I haven't gone back and watched the fight. Yeah, as I was watching, I felt like Geoff's kind of slowed his volume down a little bit.
It looked like he was getting frustrated at the movement because he would blitz in and he would hit him, but yet Garry would still be able to move, and he'd go,
exactly.
I have to do this all over again now.
Exactly. And it's like, well, yeah, if you would keep doing that, I think you could have won the fight. You know what I mean? And I don't want to take away from me and Machado Garry at all. I mean, undefeated for a reason. I know people like to hate on him because of things in his personal life and all that. I think that's dumb if you're breaking down a fight and talking about it. I think Ian Garry is really good. I think he's a good fighter. And he wants to fight Colby Covington next. That could be a great fight for him, a great opportunity. But I do believe this was a fight that Geoff Neal could have won. And I don't want to take away in the same way, talk about, I always hate to take away from a winning fighter because that winning fighter had to go execute. But I see that, man, I think if Geoff had just kept on doing what was successful in round one, he may have been able to turn the tide in this. And he is tough, man. Geoff Neal is just not somebody you want to fight because, he's not a big superstar. He's not a big name by any stretch, but he is just tough, man. He is a tough out.
Yeah. The criticism of Garry, I think, is somewhat founded in just with the pre-fight hype. After this fight, I'm going to be too big of a star to even for them to put a card around me in Ireland. And then you pick your shots and circle your path to clearly the better technical martial artist, your way to victory. Listen, outside of that, that's where I see the criticism being validated to a degree.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Ian Garry is a stud.
He really is. And I do think it's important to qualify his statement about going to Ireland. And that is that venue only seats about like 9,000 people, right? And so when he said that, what he's saying is, look, if I'm fighting for a title, if I'm, they're not going to bring a pay-per-view into a venue that's 9,000 seats. Conor McGregor, right, fought Diego Brandao there and never fought there again because now, obviously, comparing anybody to Conor McGregor is a little difficult because he's on a level all his own. But just saying, like, you become a champion, you're doing a pay-per-view, you're not going to bring an event back to a 9,000 seat venue. And I think that's what he meant, practically speaking. But the average consumer, the average fan isn't going to break down all those. Oh, well, what he meant was the venue size. I
didn't even think about that. I just thought
100%. And okay. I get it. And I totally get why. That's why I wanted to qualify it. But I get why most people would miss that subtle nuance. But I do think what you're saying is right. And I said it off the top, and I'll say it too now. People were hating on the fight. There were a lot of boos. I saw a lot of people online kind of cracking on. I was like, well, I don't know. It's a technical fight. Yeah, it's not a rock'em sock'em robots out there. It's more of a technical fight. But I do think you are right when you qualify in like the pre-fight talk and the expectations. You would like to come in and get a finish. No, nobody wants to see a guy just kind of tactically outpoint somebody over the course of 15 minutes. That's not what you really want to see. You want to see a fight, and this is more of a tactical showcase.
And before we get going, the last thing that I want to touch on is Danny, the left hand to God, Barlow. If you've been a fan of this program over the last year, you've heard that name multiple times. Yes, he was making his UFC debut, but there is star power in this guy. He is going to be a tough out. I'm saying this right now. He is a tough out for the top 5 of the division today.
Wow. That is high praise to Indeed. But I tell you what, man, the physical skills are there. Yeah, and if you hadn't seen him compete before, if you didn't see his rise, up through the regional division, his fights in CFFC, totally understand if this was your first exposure to Danny Barlow. But if you saw it, I think you got to be excited about what you saw. And Josh Quinlan, by the way, is no pushover, man. That was not when they didn't first announce this matchup. I thought, ooh, man, that's a tough one right off the bat. Because stylistically, like Josh is going to come bring it as well. He's going to stand in there. He's going to trade with you. He's going to look to throw bombs. He's not going to wilt in the face of pressure, and he didn't, man. But Barlow came out cracking, and I think you can see his speed is insane. His pinpoint striking is incredible. The power that he packs in there. He's firing off these leaping knees in there that could have ended the night at some point along the way. I mean, the dude is
with
just
the
dangerous.
fluidity. It almost looks like he was like showing off when he was doing it, but he wasn't. Every one of them landed.
It's just so slick, man. And he's got, it's left-handed God. The right is powerful as well. But when he drops that left down the middle, it's nasty. He's just so comfortable. And he's still very early in his career, man. I mean, he's in the UFC. That's crazy. That's crazy. 8-0, 4 years of fighting. That is unbelievable. And the guy some people are just naturals at it, man. The dude is a natural athlete, and he has taken to fighting, man. And he's got power in it. And yeah, I think you see why we were all so excited about watching this guy rise up the ranks. And look, are we crowning him UFC champion right now? No. Look, there's going to be some tests along the way, of course, man. It's a long road to the top of the UFC, man. It really is. But
and now with an injury, how does he recover from that? That's
right. But did it with a broken arm. That's crazy on top of it. So that's going to take some time away. But man, you saw some flashes of it. If you hadn't seen it compete before, now you see why we've been excited about what this kid brings to the table, man. He's definitely got some skills, and it was kind of a weird stoppage from Jason Herzog. It was just because he didn't really wave it off, so it looked like he was almost second guessing himself for a second. But no, I mean, Quinlan was out. He was busted
just
up,
literally sunk into him.
Yeah, and I think that might, because I was like, man, I was like, did he kind of change his mind? Once you touch a fighter, right, the fight's over. And Herzog kind of touched Barlow, and then and I think it was almost because Quinlan was basically collapsing towards him. I think maybe he just rather than go through the motion of waving it off, he was kind of like, let me brace this guy real quick because he's in trouble. Man, it was a great performance from Danny Barlow.
I don't know if I said this before on the show or not, but I've reffed Danny Barlow a number of times now. I've probably reffed two or three of his pro fights. Being from this region, I'm usually get the call to ref around here, and I've reffed a number of his amateur fights as well. And he may be the purest, best athlete. I know MMA wise, he's the best athlete I've ever been in the cage with. I can tell you that without a shadow of a doubt. And I've been in the cage with some UFC stars, right? He is the purest, best athlete I've ever been in the cage with, seen up close. And he might be the greatest athlete that I've seen up close. And I work in the NBA.
Wow. That is high praise. But I can't argue with you. There was some people. Bruce Buffer, the legend, Bruce Buffer, after that fight came over to me. And I was like, man, and he had no idea that I had, seen this kid before, that was somebody we had our eye on. He was impressed. He was like, man, that kid looks good, man. Put together well for the division, looks slick on his feet. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. So I think he's caught the eye of a lot of people on the way up, man. Anybody that's seen the guy perform in person, it's just you can tell there's something special about him, man. So again, hopefully this recovery from injury doesn't slow him down. And again, getting to the top of the UFC is no easy task, man. Everybody in the UFC is good, but the kid's got some skills. It's nice to see people from, the Memphis area rising up the ranks and doing good, man. And he's somebody to keep an eye on for sure.
He's the only person that I've seen. He's a counter striker. Okay. Danny Barlow is a counter striker, but he's a counter striker who's beating you to the punch. It's wild. So when you start throwing, he doesn't make you miss, then counter. He throws and beats you to it. That's how damn athletic and fast this guy is. It's wild to be in there and see it in real time.
It's such a great point, right? How are you a counter fighter, but you don't actually have to slip the shot to get there? It's like, I see he's about to go, so his left hand's dropping, so I'm coming over the top of that. It's crazy, man. The speed, and you said it, the other word that you nailed it was the fluidity, man. It's just, there's fluidity in what he does, man. It's incredible.
Star power in the making. We'll see what happens with his rise in the UFC. As you said, we're hoping that that injury doesn't derail any of that anytime soon. So wrapping up the show, we got the PFL versus Bellator this weekend from
Riyadh, Saudi Arabia,
main event. is Fiera versus Ryan Bader, but champion versus champion card. You excited for it?
I am. I think, depending on how much you want to commit of your Saturday to mixed martial arts, this is actually pretty cool because the PFL Bellator card is early because it's from Saudi Arabia, and then the Mexico City card is late for the UFC. So you can actually watch the entirety of all of them if you want to. I'm excited for it. This is a big event. There's a lot of fights on here that I'm looking forward to. I mean, Thiago Santos versus Yoel Romero, when they announced that one, I'm just like, that's going to be a bizarre fight. I got to see that. Aaron Pico is in action against Gabriel Braga. I'm looking forward to that. The professional debut of Biagio Ali Walsh. Clarissa Shields is back. So these are all in the prelims. Then you start talking about, the main card. I mean, there's some great Clay Collin versus AJ McKee should be an amazing fight. So it's cool. It's a big moment, right? I mean, we talked about the acquisition, PFL acquiring Bellator, and this is the first time we're really getting to see the activation of that, right? Because the two brands are coming together. They're fighting for some special championship belts that are going to be revealed this week as well. And so, there's promotional bragging rights along the line as well, but there's actual hardware as well. So I'm excited for this. I really am. I'm fired up about it. I will say, though, I think it's probably going to go, a little bit underappreciated, maybe a little bit undernoticed. It's a Saturday afternoon card, which is always a struggle. Even the UFC, the mighty power of the UFC, when they do an afternoon card because they're operating from Abu Dhabi or wherever it may be, they say right off the top, that's probably about a 20% decline in purchase rate just because people are so dialed in and used to seeing their fights on Saturday night that even the power of the UFC has difficulty messaging to the fans that this is a unique time. And so people look up and they're like, I thought there were fights tonight. No, they were this afternoon. So I think that's going to be a problem. And it's a pay-per-view. It's $49.99. It's not something you can just flip on ESPN Plus and throw on and be like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of hanging around the house today and I'm doing some errands. I want to watch this. You got to commit your $50 to it. And I think that's a tough ask. I mean, it just really is. It's especially right now, man.
It's 3 that night.
That's it. Exactly. You got the UFC that night. So I'm fired up about it, man. I think it's a big event. It's a historical event. I don't know how financially successful it's going to be, but I mean, this is a long play for them. This is not like, hey, man, they're all in on this, and if this one doesn't work, they don't know what they're going to do. No, this is stage one, and this is a big moment in the history of the PFL. So I'm excited for it. And again, it's followed up by a fun card in Mexico City as well with the UFC, with really a couple of big. I mean, to me, there's some fun fights on here, but really for the UFC, it's Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. That's at the top, and Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega. I mean, that's a 1-2 punch of fantastic fights and meaningful fights in the flyweight and featherweight division. So fun fights on tap for this weekend.
Man, fun episode today. Congratulations to the new Ilia Topuria. Like you said, there's a rain in store. I don't want to count any chickens before they hatch, but he looks every bit of a guy who's got a rein in front of him. Hope Volk takes some time off. I do want to see that rematch, though. I think Volk does not need another win. He does deserve a rematch. But let's push it down a little bit.
A little further.
All righty. Well, it looks like we got our weekend set. A lot of MMA action that we are going to watch. With that being said, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.